Thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. I'm Teresa Lyson with NICC Business and Community Solutions. Today's topic is why we react the way we do with Megan Thole. Megan is a leadership speaker, facilitator, and coach known for her calm power and grounded presence. Megan brings over 12 years of leadership experience, a master's in leadership and management, and a certification in PROSCI. It probably says something. Change management and mindfulness coaching. She helps leaders unhook from overachievement and lead from who they truly are, with clarity, compassion, and confidence. Through her blend of mindfulness, emotional intelligence, and practical tools, Megan shifts high-pressure environments into spaces where real connection, trust, and aligned action can thrive. If you have any questions throughout Megan's presentation today, please add them to the Q&A or chat box at the bottom of your screen, and we will save some time at the end of the webinar to answer those. Thank you for all for joining us today, and with that, I will turn it over to Megan.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. With this webinar setup, just so you all know, I can't see you. So if you're eating lunch, doing a late afternoon snack, feel free to do that. And also, I'm not sure where you're joining from, but I am in Cedar Rapids, which my car read 65 degrees. So not that you need my permission, but feel free to take that laptop outside, listen on your phone, do what you need to do to enjoy some of the nice weather. So one of the things I kind of like to start with, just to be able to get a feel for maybe who's here in the room today, is start with a question to have you drop in the chat. So thinking about the beautiful weather today, let me know when the weather changes like this from winter to springtime. Give me one word of what you feel with that change in season and just drop it in the chat. Oh man, these are so good. All right, I'm going to give you a few of them because I can feel all these things too. So alive, refreshed, new beginnings, energized, hopeful, happy, joyful, relief, reset, renewed. So many great things. As I had the windows open over the weekend, I was like, man, just that spring smell, that fresh air smell just adds so much like life to me. And so I'm not a winter person, so I'm so happy it's getting nice out for me. I am a February birthday, so my birthday is actually this weekend, and every year I wish for at least 40 and sunny. So I don't know what the weather's doing this weekend, but earlier this week, at least I'm getting this warm weather. So again, thank you for being here. With my business, Hello Mindful You, I do coaching, speaking, trainings around mindfulness, emotional intelligence, and really building our internal resilience. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And so, from a show of hands, give me a Y or a thumbs up in the chat if you have ever been in a situation where you reacted in a way that you maybe wished you wouldn't have. Maybe you showed up in the situation and you're like, man, I really wish this would have went differently. If you felt that way before, just give me a thumbs up or a Y. Perfect. Definitely seeing lots of those come in. That's amazing. So we know that we're all showing up to this conversation here, not perfect, but willing to learn. And that's the space that we want to be in. And so we know in these situations, a lot of times when we react in a way that we're maybe not proud of, maybe we didn't want to, it's typically driven by stress. And so stress can come on really quickly. Sorry, guys, I just have to change my view really quick. Okay, so stress can come on really quickly, and then it puts us in this state where all of a sudden we're just being super reactive. We're operating on autopilot, and maybe we don't even know why we're reacting the way that we do. And so that's what we're going to tackle today. So when you're showing up saying, like, yes, I've been in these situations before, perfect. One, you're admitting that maybe you have some room to grow and there's opportunity to grow. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And so before we kind of dive in deep to, what are our reactions and why are we responding this way? I want to just talk to you about why do we care about this in a professional setting? So why does this matter at work? And so if we think about our experience in the workplace, our experience is so heavily shaped by reactions. If you can think about a work meeting you're in And maybe someone has a really big reaction to someone or something, positive, negative. Typically, in these situations, it kind of leads towards those more negative emotions that we at least associate with. So, anger, sadness. And think about how much that shapes that experience, that meeting, that moment. Those are the things that you remember. And as a leader, as a team member, when we have those moments, we can absolutely repair and work back from those. But I'll be honest, as a person, it's really hard to forget some of those situations when someone reacted really big and made you feel maybe less than or, really on the spot in a meeting. You're probably going to be able to forgive them, but it is a little bit harder to forget those situations. So a lot of what we want to talk through today is how do we really move from being in that really reactive state, maybe when those situations are high pressure and high stress. And so really being aware of how we respond under stress and in high pressure situations is what's going to help us be able to choose how we respond moving forward. When I think about emotional intelligence, a lot of times emotional intelligence is talked about as a soft skill. And how I see emotional intelligence is it is a professional skill. It's something that we all need in the workplace for our workplace to thrive, not only for ourselves internally as coworkers and colleagues, but for our customers. If we're working with customers and clients in the community, we have to have those skills of emotional intelligence. And so when I think about emotional intelligence, again, it's our ability to understand and recognize our own emotions and also to be able to respond effectively to other people's emotions. And so I've spent a lot of my career working in higher education. And so when I think about some of the things that when we're working with employers and the workforce and some of the feedback we get in terms of programming and skills, for a long time, the focus was on, again, technical skills. We need people to be able to come in and do this job. And the shift has been towards, again, emotional intelligence and these professional skills. We need individuals who can communicate. We need individuals who know how to navigate conflict effectively. And so these are some really important skills that we can always continue to grow and sharpen. We think about how we're showing up in the workplace. When we are showing up with trust and clarity, it makes communication easier and clearer. And so all of our focus when we're talking about how do we react, we want to move from reacting in terms of like this kind of autopilot response. So maybe we are in this situation that we know is high stress or high pressure for us, and we're automatically getting upset, or we're maybe automatically sending off this email. Or maybe we're not one that does that type of reaction, but internally we're talking really negative to ourselves about the situation. So it maybe isn't always this outward facing thing, but maybe it's internally how you're speaking to yourself. And so this matters because we want to move towards this intentional response that we're choosing in the situation, no matter how extreme the situation is, we're choosing how we respond. And so if we think about how much awareness and emotional intelligence matter at work, the next question is really, how do we work on actually building those skills for ourselves and for our teams? This is where mindfulness comes in. And so for me, mindfulness is really how we're showing up in our daily life. I think one of the things that when I talk about my business as Hello Mindful You, or I talk about how I work with leaders building skills in mindfulness, it often goes right to this meditation space, which there is a space of mindfulness and meditation, and it's a great way to kind of explore that for yourself. But what I'm talking about here is things that we can do in daily practice and our daily habits. And so by definition, mindfulness is paying attention on purpose in the present moment without judgment. And so we're actively paying attention to how we're dedicating our attention. And this work isn't mastered in a day. It's a constant practice. And so even if you're sitting in this session thinking like, hey, I was really excited to, sign on into this session with Megan, but now my phone went off and I'm distracted by an email or whatever the case may be. What you want to do in those situations is just recognize that you are distracted and then bring your mind back to what we're doing here today. in this session, when you're in work, when you're at home. Those are the types of things. Noticing is always going to give you that power then to bring yourself back to the present moment and also to choose differently. So when I think about mindfulness and how we're bringing that into the professional space, is really mindfulness is at the core and at the foundation of emotional intelligence. The hardest piece about mindfulness for myself personally, and the thing that I think is the hardest for most, is this space, this without judgment. So when we think about without judgment, we're not just talking about external. I would say for myself, yes, my goal is always to not judge individuals externally. Sometimes easier said than done, right? Like we'd all like to say we're non-judging. However, when we're talking about mindfulness, we're really looking at it from the perspective of ourselves. How are we judging ourselves? Are we being kind to ourselves? And so this is a space that I think trips a lot of us up, from a space of self-doubt to being extra critical. Maybe we think we have to be perfect in everything that we do. And so with this non-judgment piece, again, hardest part, but honestly, I think the most critical part. And so when we can meet ourselves with greater self-compassion, that's when we start to create space for growth. So again, overall definition of mindfulness sounds pretty simple, but it's really about how do we integrate this into our daily work, into our daily lives. So thinking about mindfulness in daily life, we can practice mindfulness in conversations, in decisions, and in how we're reacting. And so again, mindfulness, the way that we're going to leave this session thinking about it today is it's all about noticing. It's noticing our thoughts, noticing our feelings, noticing our behaviors. So when we start to notice things say we're in a meeting and we notice all of a sudden our tone starts to shift. Maybe our body language is shifting. Those are some clear signs that something is going on with us. So maybe we're not happy with what's happening in a meeting. Maybe someone said something and we're feeling offended. Maybe we were supposed to have something done and we misunderstood the requirements. And so it was done differently. And now we're sitting in front of a group of people, again, maybe feeling a little embarrassed, a little confused, all of those things. When those things start to happen, there are clear signals in our mind, in our body, that if we actually take the time to pause and listen to that, it's telling us something. And the one thing I want to mention here is sometimes when this is something new, a new skill you're trying to learn, you might not notice it in the moment. So you might be in a meeting, you might be with your kids, you might be wherever, and something happens, and then you are here after the fact thinking, man, I wish I would have handled that differently. Wish I would have thought through that differently. That's okay. The win there is that you noticed. You were aware of it, even if it was after the fact. That awareness piece and just noticing is so important, because what we learn with our brains is that once we start noticing these things, it becomes a habit for us. And so, yes, it might feel overwhelming when you're trying to do anything new, but think about some of the new things or new habits you've implemented in your life. And once you start doing them, they kind of go on this autopilot cycle where you don't even realize you're doing it. It doesn't feel like extra effort because it's just part of your daily habit. That's how mindfulness comes into these conversations. When we talk about it in these kind of chunks and pieces, it feels like it's this, concrete process that we're taking ourselves through, when really a lot of this work happens in a matter of seconds. So curiosity truly changes everything. When we approach ourselves, our work, our life with curiosity instead of judgment, that's what truly opens up space for learning and space for growth. And so what this can look like is asking yourself better questions. So instead of approaching yourself with judgment, why did I react this way in a particular situation? I should have known better. I'm a professional. I have X number of experience. I shouldn't have been this way in this situation. Get curious with yourself and ask some good questions. Why did I feel the need to respond that way? What is happening with me? It really just creates this opportunity to really look inward and say, okay, if this situation happens again, what in particular about this made me feel this way? And also, what did I feel? Why did I feel the need to respond that way? Did I feel threatened? Did I feel shame? Whatever the case may be, but approaching it with curiosity truly opens up the space for you to learn and grow versus you just feeling really bad about the situation. So, as I mentioned, self compassion and compassion in general before, curiosity really opens that space for us to treat ourselves with greater self compassion, treat ourselves like a friend or a colleague coming to us with a situation, and give ourselves that additional grace. And so, as we think about bringing curiosity into the picture, we can really start to understand why some of our reactions happen in the first place. So, why do we react the way we do? Very loaded question, but some of the things we can start to tackle and think about, a lot of the ways we react, they are learned responses. And so maybe we've seen someone respond in this situation before. Automatic patterns. So we're thinking about what are some things, again, we don't put a lot of thought into it and it just happens. It's probably something we've adopted from someone else's style before. And honestly, a lot of the way we react comes from a place of really trying to protect ourselves. So maybe at one point in the past, you were in a situation, and based on the way it happened or played out, you learned a specific behavior or way to react to protect yourself in that situation. And so there's so many ways and so many reasons as to why we're showing up and responding the way we do. And it really does take some time for us to kind of sit back and think about in situations, is there a pattern? When I'm feeling really stressed and a team member comes to me with a question or something new gets added to my plate, do I have a consistent response? And if so, is that actually how I want to be responding? Is that how I want to be showing up? And if not, this is where you can kind of take that deep dive for yourself and learn ways to, one, you're already starting with noticing that behavior, but then two, take that opportunity to think about, why am I showing up this way and how do I want to show up different? And then that space to choose what that looks like for you. So, what I want us to look at is just kind of look through a framework that just talks us through kind of our reactions. So, no fancy title or anything here, but truly just like a reaction loop. How do we experience some of these things that happen to us? And so, there's always going to be an event or something that kind of kicks us off into this process. And so something happens. The event might be a meeting, a conversation, whatever that looks like. And then we have certain thoughts and emotions about it. And then there's this reaction point. So I think I mentioned earlier, the reaction for some people, it might be big and vocal. And for others, it might be more of an internal reaction that you're having. So maybe it's not something you're saying out loud, but as we talk about that judgment piece, maybe it's something internal that you're thinking about. So I wanted to give you an example. And so I like to give an example of something that happened recently because I fully believe with this work and trying to kind of do the inner work, be more mindful and show up in ways that really serve me to be sustainable in any of my roles, I have to always practice what I preach, and I'm always constantly learning. And so I had a situation just last week, which this isn't a big thing, but it stuck out for me as I was planning this session. So for me, the event was I had prepared a presentation for a leadership team meeting and went through, everything was going well. And then I noticed on a slide, I had spelt a vice president's name wrong. And I was like, wow, okay, don't love this. I'm definitely someone who likes things to be put together and neat. And I'm definitely recovering from being a perfectionist, just wanting, to be perceived that I'm competent in all of those things. And so I instantly started having these feelings of, Wow. What are people going to think of me? Are they going to think that I'm not good at my job because I misspelled this? And then also thinking like, hopefully people just don't notice. Maybe they don't know how her name was spelled and those types of things. And so all of these things were going through my head and was having a pretty negative conversation with myself. And so honestly, I just took the time to pause and remembered that in the large scheme of things, this is a pretty simple thing. And for me, one of the things that's always helpful is to kind of shift to, okay, this happened and how am I going to prevent this from happening, or how am I going to feel better about this next time and not be worried that this will happen again. And so I kind of went through some things in my head and I'm like, hey, I'm not good at asking for help sometimes for people to review things, but I also know I'm a terrible person to review my own work because I know what it's supposed to say in my head. So I'm not good at catching those examples. And so for me, it was just an internal process. It wasn't anything that like expressed out loud to anybody other than here in this session today. But it's just an example of, it doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be loud all the time, but these are the things that are going through our brains constantly and keeping our minds busy. And so the more we can meet ourselves with compassion and allow ourselves to say, hey, everybody makes mistakes. This wasn't a big deal. For me to feel better about it, I did have to go up to that person and say, I apologize. I know how to spell your name. And their response was, hey, totally fine. Also super sweet that you came to apologize. And hopefully people just think that's how my name's spelled and they don't email me. So they were cool with it. But again, just sharing an example of, again, not a big thing, but something that was consuming my time, energy, and my mind. And so I want to just take a quick pause and I want you to think about maybe your own experience in that kind of scenario. So, what is something that's maybe happened to you recently within the last month or so that you can think of? And it can be work related, it can be in your personal life, whatever comes up first for you. And I just want you to pause and think about that situation. And as you're thinking about that situation, I want you to notice, what are your thoughts? What are your feelings? What are some of those emotions that are coming up for you in that situation? And then I want you to write down a question. If you were going to get curious about that situation and be kind to yourself, meet yourself with compassion, what's something you would ask yourself about that situation? And if you feel comfortable, you can drop your question in the chat. You don't have to put the whole scenario, but if there's a question that you would ask yourself when you're getting curious about, why am I experiencing this? Why do I care about this situation in this way? What's a question you might ask yourself? Is it true? Amazing. Did you know that our brains make things up? So we constantly tell ourselves stories that we believe are true. And so, is it true? Fact check some of the things that are going on in your mind. Great question. Yeah, so maybe you've experienced this feeling of feeling small, whether it's in a meeting, some space in your life. And so, why did I feel small, making me feel the need to react that way? Some of these spaces, it's hard to sometimes stay in this space. I think there's an assumption because I speak about this work, I care about this work, that it's always come natural to me. And that could be further from the truth because I am someone who's always had a hard time processing my emotions. As I was looking at some things in my office, I have this note that says, I appreciate Megan's leadership. She's the like the calm in the storm, always calm, cool, and collected in times of chaos. And I absolutely portrayed that on the outside, but I never felt that on the inside. And so now I can say confidently that in many ways I do feel both that on the inside and outside, that I am calm, cool, and collected, but it wasn't always that way. And I've done a lot of work. Can I control this? Yes. So thinking about circle of control, that's an amazing point, is we spend so much time thinking about these external things that we have zero control over. And it takes up so much of our mental capacity. If we can focus on what do I actually have control over in this situation, that brings us back to a space where we can actually make progress, feel like we're taking back that power and control in the situation. Thank you so much for sharing some of those. All right. So when we think about this awareness piece, how do we bring awareness into our life? And so we want to think about creating space. And so creating space, we have to name first what we're dealing with, what we're feeling, what we're experiencing in. So if it's in the workplace, if it's a particular person, situation, project, environment, whatever that is, naming it and saying, hey, I have an issue with this thing, whatever that thing is. And then taking that pause to do this deep dive, just as we did in the previous exercise. And then, just like was in the chat, we're going to ask, is it true? We're going to question the story we're telling ourselves. Everything we believe isn't always factual. We oftentimes make up stories, again, based on this inner world that we have and how we're seeing ourselves and how we're experiencing everything. And so we want to question that. We want to figure out what are the facts in the situation and what can I prove, and what is maybe something that I'm thinking or feeling that might not actually be accurate. With any of this work, consistency is what matters over length of time. And so when you can consistently pause, take that space to name what you're feeling and question that story, you continue to build that inner capacity that you have. We're not saying, and I'm not saying, that you have to dedicate hours to this work, but just work on dedicating maybe 5 minutes a day to just doing this internal reflection, because you will see so much growth in yourself and how you're responding, how you're understanding yourself, building your own internal self-awareness. And when that happens, it just starts to compound. Again, it becomes a natural thing that you do without having to put in any extra effort. This is a practice. Just like I said, it's not something that's going to come to you overnight. You're not going to be perfect at it, and that's okay. The goal is never to be perfect. The goal is to practice and grow, to grow and learn. And so remembering, again, it's a practice. We want to identify and be aware of how we're showing up. When we understand and when we're self-aware, it gives us the power of choice. Within that power to within that power to choose, we do build self-trust. And when we start trusting ourselves, we build our internal resilience. We talk about resilience often. It's in this sometimes external facing way. But resilience is really this, again, internal capacity to know and trust yourself that no matter what comes my way, I know I will be able to navigate it, and I'm confident in my ability to navigate it. Even if I haven't done it before, I know I will make it through. I know I can get through this. That's what resilience is when you're thinking about it in that internal capacity way. So I leave you with this notion of awareness changes everything. I have a quote. I feel like I live and die by short and sweet quotes and things that really change my perspective or help open up a new perspective. And so I have this quote on my board by Sheryl Sandberg, and it's, we cannot change what we are not aware of. And once we are aware, we cannot help but change. So this is the work. Trusting yourself more, being curious. Curiosity helps us learn. It helps us grow. And then just being open and being compassionate to yourself. When we open ourselves up to self-compassion, it gives us so much space for growth, and space for growth opens up space for gratitude and joy and happiness in our lives. So, with that, thank you so much for being here. I have really appreciated the time, and I'll turn it back over to Teresa to close us out for today.
Thank you, Megan. What a great message to start our week off. Um, there should be a poll on your screen. If you would just take a second to give us a little bit of feedback on today's session, we would appreciate that. And feel free to drop any questions or comments in the chat box for Megan, and we can answer some questions right now if you have any. Um, this is just a small snippet of the session that Megan has, along with her library of classes and training that she offers. So if you would like more information on training with Megan or on this class in particular, please feel free to reach out to me. I will drop my email in the chat box and will be in a follow-up email from that you will receive later this week.
Perfect. Thank you so
So
much.